Attention bowlers, we are going to get started. Welcome back to Bowl-O-Rama in Portsmouth, New Hampshire for another thrilling Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour match. I am Steve Kelly on the call. This is a doubleheader today. This is Anthony Leonardi versus Tom Grasso, and Steve Kelly versus Steve Poulin, Class D and Class A respectively. The match format is 5 strings and 14 points up for grabs, 2 points per string, 4 for total pinfall, with ties splitting points. Good as always to have you along with us. This match was live streamed on Sunday, December 15th, 2024, and it's available for rewatching anytime upon the conclusion of this match. For those interested, I would like to highlight a few things. First, this broadcast should have subtitles and live captioning enabled, so if you enjoy this feature, please feel free to enable it in the controls below. If you're watching this broadcast on YouTube, the transcript feature will also likely be available. Next, throughout the match, I'll describe the play-by-play action and provide up-to-the-minute scoring to the best of my ability. Anthony Leonardi and Steve Kelly's scores will be updated at a delayed pace because Steve Kelly was actively bowling. Without further ado, Anthony Leonardi is to the right of the head pin and drops 7. Steve Kelly's opening pitch first ball is also to the right of the head pin, and he also drops 7. Anthony Leonardi will fire first on the 1, the 2, and the 9 pins. He takes out the 2 and leaves the 1 and the 9 slightly off target from the head pin. Steve Kelly, meanwhile, also off target, but a piece of wood spins over to take the 1 pin that he missed. He takes out the 2 and the 8, and the piece of wood takes the 1. Anthony Leonardi will take the head pin and leave the 9 pin for a 9 box. Steve Kelly has a spare. Steve Kelly is 10 and a bonus after 1. Anthony Leonardi is 9 after 1. This match is not head-to-head, so bowlers from the opposite pairings are bowling next to each other, side by side. Anthony Leonardi is on the head pin and drops 8, leaves the 5 and the 9. Steve Kelly also on the head pin, leaves the 4 and the 7. 8 drops for both bowlers, no splits. Bowlers waiting for wood to settle. At Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama, the wood tends to be a lot more active along with the sidewalls and the decks, so it takes a little bit longer for things to settle, and that's a spare for Anthony Leonardi. Steve Kelly punches out the 4 a little bit too full and leaves the 7 unharmed. Leonardi is 19 and a bonus after 2. Steve Kelly just takes a 10 box and sits at 18 on the fill in the first box. That's 18 after 1. And then with the 10 box, it's 28 after 2. Anthony Leonardi is working on a spare on lane 20 at Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama on the Sunday afternoon, and that is a slow-moving strike for Anthony Leonardi. The 6 pin is the last to fall, and meanwhile, Steve Kelly also in the pocket. He drops everything but the 4 pin. 9 drops, single pin spare opportunity, so Anthony Leonardi has a strike on spare, and Steve Kelly has a spare of his own. And that puts Steve Kelly at 38 and a bonus after 3. Anthony Leonardi, all the while, is at 39 and a bonus after 3 with that strike. Leonardi filling a strike. He's to the right of the head pin. Pins are still mixing, still falling. He drops 7 so far. First ball in the bonus. Steve Kelly on his bonus on the spare. It's a late falling 9 drop. With the 10 pin, that's all that's left. So that's a spare 9. That's a 47 after 3 for Steve Kelly. Just doing a quick score correct on the automatic scoring system provided by Cubica AMF. Anthony Leonardi finishing his strike fill. It'll be a 9 fill on the strike. That puts him at 48 after 3. And Steve Kelly will take another spare on the single. Leonardi all the while on his 10 box. He'll take a 9. That puts Anthony Leonardi at 57 after 4, and Steve Kelly is currently at 57 and a bonus after 4. Anthony Leonardi will lead off first at Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. ACST doubleheader action, and that's a wild pitch from Anthony Leonardi off the right, just on the 10 pin. Steve Kelly, meanwhile, with the inverse on the head pin with a 9 fill. That puts him at 66 after 4. Leonardi on the remedial second ball, no mark, leaves the 2-3-6. Steve Kelly takes the 10 for another spare, putting him at 76 after 5 plus a bonus. So he'll be sitting on a mark. There's 4 spares in this half of this first game for Steve Kelly. Anthony Leonardi finishes with the 9 box for 66 after 5 with a strike and a spare. The scores are just being keyed in now, so they should be appearing visually in just a few moments as past Steve Kelly runs back to the terminal and enters the scores. So you'll be able to see those visually in just a moment. But in the meantime, our other 2 bowlers in our matchup today, Steve Poulin, who's facing Steve Kelly on the left in the blue, and Tom Grasso in the gray on the right on lane 20. Tom Grasso leads off first. It's a head pin shot and nearly a strike. The 3 pin is the only one that hasn't fallen yet. Steve Poulin, though, on the first ball is a strike. He's perfect so far. A hammer ball. Both bowlers almost with strikes, but Tom Grasso just didn't have enough to take the 3 pin down. So Steve Poulin is sitting on 10 and a bonus after 1. Tom Grasso misses his spare opportunity and misses on the 3rd ball. Excuse me. Now he misses on the 3rd ball. Past Steve entered the score a little bit too early, but it's still a 9 box regardless for Tom Grasso after 1. Steve Poulin starting out hot. 1 strike after 1. In this first string of 5. And only 1 box thrown for both these bowlers so far. Tom Grasso on the 1-2 pocket. He drops 6, leaves the right side bail. The bucket of 5, the 5, 6, 3, 8, 10s. Steve Poulin is slightly off to the right side Candlepin corner, but he gets 1 more ball to complete the bonus on the strike in the first. So no double strike for Steve Poulin. Tom Grasso fires on the right side bucket of 5, and 4 of the bucket of 5 fall, but there's a piece of wood running towards the 10, and it doesn't look like it's going to take it. Steve Poulin, though, will complete the strike fill with a 9 fill. Strike fill with a 9, excuse me. So that's 19 after 1 for Steve Poulin. Tom Grasso is firing on the 10 for a 10 box, and he gets that 10 and gets a 10. 19 after 2 for Grasso, and a 10 box for Steve Poulin, puts him at 29 after 2. Grasso 19 after 2 compared to Anthony Leonardi's 29 after 2. Steve Poulin 29 after 2 versus Steve Kelly's 28 after 2. Competitive matches, folks. Tom Grasso's first ball is a little bit off to the right, takes 2 pins in the back on the right side. Steve Poulin on the pocket drops 9, leaves the 7 pin on the deck. Tom Grasso looking to follow up on that first ball, possibly get a nice spare out of it. He's on the head pin and gets a nice splash, but leaves the 7 and the 9 on the deck. Steve Poulin right on target on the 7 pin, takes it out for a spare. That puts Steve Poulin at 39 and a bonus after 3. Tom Grasso working on a 10 box here with an 8 box minimum, and he'll take it. Plays the wood, takes a 7 and the 9 for a 10 box. Steve Poulin is at 39 and a fill after 3. Tom Grasso is at 29 after 3 with that second 10 box in a row. Steve Poulin in the blue shirt on the left on lane 19. Tom Grasso in the gray shirt on the right on lane 20. He fires. He's a little bit full on the head pin on the 1-2 pocket. Drops 5, leaves the 7, 10, 4, 6, 3. Steve Poulin, again, generous 9 drop, leaves the 7 on the deck. At Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama, the sidewalls and the decks are very, very active, so pins have a tendency to really fall and have enough force to roll over and take other pins down, as we just saw with Tom Grasso with the 3 pin falling as a nice generous bonus. Steve Poulin will take the 7 for a 10 box, spare, for 58 and a bonus after 4. 3 for 4 on marks for Steve Poulin. He's perfect so far. Tom Grasso will take another 10, his third 10 box in a row, putting him at 39 after 4. With 1 more to go before these two bowlers sit. Steve Poulin is at 58 and a bonus after 4. Compare that to Steve Kelly's 57 and a bonus after 4 at the same point in the match, which became a 66 with the 9 fill. Tom Grasso is off to the right of the head pin, but gets a nice 7 drop, leaves the 1, 2, 7. Steve Poulin on the head pin. 7 go down, 3, 6, 10 are on the right side of the deck. Tom Grasso shooting for a spare. He's on the 1, 2, 7. Needs to fire on the 1, 2 pocket to make this happen. And Grasso does precisely that, but it's a bit of a light hit, and the 7 pin is unharmed. Steve Poulin, though, will take out the 3, 6, 10 for another spare. That's 4 spares for 5, and it's a perfect half, 75 and a bonus for Steve Poulin. Steve Kelly also perfect, 76 and a ball after 5. So we, in our Class A matchup in particular, it is a perfect Perfect half so far. Tom Grasso finishes with a 48 half, 48 after 5. Anthony Leonardi, 66 after 5. Anthony Leonardi currently leads in the match by 18. Needless to say, the game as well. Steve Kelly holds on to the lead by 1, but he has a fill on the mark to finish off, so we'll see where that takes us. But so far, we are having a fantastic competitive match at Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama. On the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, this Class D and A doubleheader, DA, DH. Steve Kelly's on the right in the navy blue shirt, Anthony Leonardi in the black on the left. Steve Kelly starts off first. He's to the right of the head pin. He fills his spare with 8. That puts him at 84 after 5. After all is said and done, he's left with the 1 and the 2 pin. Anthony Leonardi on the head pin. He's left with the 5 and the 7 on the deck. Kelly fires for the spare bid, and he'll get it. He's on the 1-2 pocket and takes the 1 and the 2 out. That's 94 and a fill for Steve Kelly in the 6th. Anthony Leonardi beans the 5, leaves the 7. No such luck on the spare bid for Anthony Leonardi. He's left with the 7 pin for a 10 box. Leonardi fires, and he completes the 10 box for 76 after 6. Steve Kelly filling a spare. 94 in a ball. On lane 20. Opening pitch. It's away. It's on the head pin. He drops 8. 4 and the 7 are on the deck. That's another 8 fill. That's 102 and 6. Leonardi is to the left of the head pin and drops 7. The 1, 3, 6 are on the deck. Kelly for the spare bid on the 4 and the 7, and it will go. That's now 112 after 7, plus a bonus. Leonardi is just off to the left of the object pins, leaves the 1, the 3, and the 6. And he's now shooting for a 10 box, and he'll take 2 of the 3. That's a 9 box. That's 85 after 7 for Anthony Leonardi. 85 after 7 for Leonardi. 112 and a bonus after 7 for Steve Kelly. Kelly's opening pitch, filling a spare once again. It's like deja vu. Is off to the right of the head pin, drops 6. That is 118 after 7. He's left with the 1, 2, 4, and 9. Anthony Leonardi is to the right of the head pin and drops 8, though, on the backdoor action. That's the 1 and the 2 pins left on the deck. Kelly for the spare. He's off target off the head pin, connects with the 2, the 4, and the pin in the rear leaves the head pin. Anthony Leonardi, similar story, connects with the 2, leaves the head pin. Both bowlers shooting at the head pin for a 10 box. Kelly goes first. Kelly fires for a 10 box, 128 after 8, breaking the streak of 5 spares in a row. Anthony Leonardi will also get his 10 box. So I do have one post-production score note. On screen, you are going to see a 9 box for Anthony Leonardi for this box. I am unsure as to why it was scored that way, both on the official paper copy for Grasso and Leonardi, as well as on the electronic scoreboard, but it appears to have been never corrected. So just as an FYI, I will be going with the totals that are seen on screen, but I do acknowledge in post-production that it appears that the 9 should have been a 10, but ended up being a 9 for Anthony Leonardi, so just an FYI on that. Again, all scores are always unofficial on the stream, but in this case, it seems everything in the official copy and unofficial copy was missed in some way. Anyways, that's another spare for Steve Kelly. That's 138 and a ball in the 9th. Leonardi, meanwhile, on a gnarly banana split, a 6 drop, is left with a 7-10-4-6 and did not get his spare. To conclude the 9th frame, he takes 2, leaves 2, 102 and 9 for Anthony Leonardi, 138 and a ball for Steve Kelly in the 9th. To close out this first game, Steve Kelly seeks to fill yet another spare, and he fires on the spare, and he's off to the left of the head pin, but it's getting a generous mix. Pin's still falling. He's left with the 1 and the 3 pins on the deck for an 8 fill. That's 146 and 9. Leonardi punches right, leaves a pile of pins on the deck with no wood. Kelly for another spare on the 1 and the 3, and it will go. That is 156 in the 10th plus a bonus. And Leonardi is still trying to clean up. Takes a few, leaves a few, left with the 1 and the 3. The 1, the 3, and the 10 on the deck. Trying to clean up. 7-box minimum. It will be a 7-box. Anthony Leonardi will finish with a 109 first game. And again, I acknowledge it probably should have been a 110 as the 8th box was scored as a 9 when it should have been a 10, but it was submitted officially as 109, so just an FYI on that one. So Steve Kelly at 156 in the 10th plus a bonus. And Kelly's on the head pin for the fill. It's a fill of 7, and that will be 163 for Steve Kelly, and that will be the first game. That's going to be a new high single for Steve Kelly in the season. And as a side note, it's also Steve Kelly's all-time high signal. He's thrown it before, once at Lakeside Lanes, but second time here at Bowl-O-Rama, and it's on stream. First time it wasn't on stream, it was during a roll-off. We now shift our focus and our attention back to Steve Poulin and Tom Grasso. Steve Poulin opens up with an 8 drop on the head pin, a definitive 8 drop, leaving the 5 and the 7 left side setback. Tom Grasso veers off to the left with a left side candlepin corner. Poulin for the spare bid, he misses the 5 to the right, takes nothing. Grasso, remedial second ball for a spare, he's on the 1-2 pocket, pin still mixing, but the 9 and the 10 remain, no mark. Poulin misses left of the 5 this time and takes an 8 box. So that was an 8 fill on his spare and an 8 box total for Steve Poulin and an 8 box for Tom Grasso. Steve Poulin, who has a record of 33 and 23 for the season. Tom Grasso, 49 and 49. Poulin is on the head pin with a split of a 4 and 10 pin left on the deck with a piece of wood perpendicular to the 4. Todd Grasso has a split of his own, 4, 6, 3, 10. Poulin tries to play the wood on the 4 and can't quite kick it over to the 10. Grasso takes an impressive spare on the split. Piece of wood kind of does all the work, dancing all around, but takes all the pins. That's a spare for Grasso. Poulin will take a 9 box. Poulin at 100 after 7. And Grasso at 66 and a bonus after 7. Steve Poulin fires. He's on the head pin, drops 7, leaves the 7-10-4. Tom Grasso's fill on his fill ends up being a 3. He's at 69 after 7. That's a right side half Worcester plus DLC. The 5 is down along with the 3 and the 9. Poulin on the 7-10-4 for a spare with a lot of wood, but he'll play it direct and bypass a lot of the wood and take a spare. Does a fantastic job. Grasso trying to do the same, but leaves the 10. Poulin's at 110 and a fill in the 8th. Grasso for the 10 pin for a 10 box, and yes sir, he'll get it. Grasso with the 10 is at 79 after 8. Steve Poulin, who in the first game threw a 134 with 5 marks, he fires. He's on the 3 pin and seems to get an odd leave out of it. Leaves the 1-2, 6, 9, 10, and Todd Grasso with a 9 drop leaves the 6. Poulin on the spare bid needs to hit the 1-2 pocket or the wood. He plays the 1-2 pocket, hits a piece of wood along the way, but leaves the 9 pin. Grasso takes a spare on the 9 pin. 89 in 9 plus a ball for Grasso. Steve Poulin will clean up for 124 and 9. Poulin, final first ball of the second game. It's right through the center, a 4-pin spread eagle. The 1, 5, 8, and 9 are taken out. And Grasso, pins are still mixing. It looks like it's going to be a 7 fill. It puts him at 96 and 9. 3, 7, 10 for Grasso with wood around the 3. Poulin to the left of the eagle. He only takes the 4 and the 7. Grasso plays the wood a little bit lightly, and it goes straight back instead of kicking over to the 7, so no mark for Grasso. Poulin for the 10 box. He gets everything. Oddly enough, the 2 pin falls last. I'm not even sure what even took it out, but it went out. That's 10 box for Poulin, 134 and 10, and Grasso with his 10 box finishes at 106 in the 10th. That is the end of the, excuse me, not the second game, the first game. That is 106 for Tom Grasso, 134 for Steve Poulin. The victors of this game so far: Steve Kelly against Steve Poulin, 163 to Poulin's 134, and Anthony Leonardi, 109 to Tom Grasso's 106. That's the end of the first game here on the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Appreciate you watching. We're at Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, by the seacoast, just a short drive from the University of New Hampshire. And a whole bunch of stuff all around the seacoast of New Hampshire. Is one of my favorite places in New Hampshire to be. But we're going to be moving on to the second game here, the second of 5. In case you missed it, you missed a fantastic first game where all 4 bowlers went over 100. Steve Kelly 163, Steve Poulin 134, Anthony Leonardi 109, and Tom Grasso 106. Steve Kelly leading by 29, and Anthony Leonardi leading by 3. Anthony Leonardi starts out first. So far with a season record of 48 and 50. When he's home, he's 12 and 30, and when he's away, he's 36 and 20. Steve Kelly on the head pin drops all but the 5. Steve Kelly has a record of 47 and 23. When he's home, he's 15 and 13, and when he's away, he's 32 and 10. That's as of round 5 for Steve Kelly, and as of round 7 for Anthony Leonardi, respectively. Steve Kelly takes the 5 for a spare. Anthony Leonardi takes the 1, 2, 10 for a 10 box here in the first. Steve Kelly is 10 in a bonus after 1. Anthony Leonardi is 10 after 1. Anthony Leonardi carries a season average as of round 7 of 98.2, home average 96.3, away average 99.7. And Anthony Leonardi's just off the head pin, drops 6 with the center triangle in the 7. Steve Kelly fills his spare with 9. That's 19 after 1, leaving the 6. Anthony Leonardi on the head pin for a spare bid, and oh my goodness, there was also a 5 pin behind that triangle as well. He leaves the 2 and the 5. Steve Kelly takes the single for a spare. That's 29 after 2, plus a bonus. Anthony Leonardi for the 10 box, 8 box minimum, and he'll take his 10. He's perfect so far, 20 after 2, 2 10 boxes in a row for Anthony Leonardi. Anthony Leonardi recently faced Jonathan Hogan, took 2 points with a 463 series, an 84, 94, 100, 101, and 84. 0 strikes, 6 spares, and 8 tens. Anthony Leonardi punches out the center with a spread eagle. Steve Kelly drops 8, leaves the 3 and the 6 for an 8 fill. Leonardi, no mark. Takes the right side of the eagle. That was a 7 fill for Steve Kelly. That was a sleeper. Sleeper's a little bit hard to see on the camera. Steve Kelly, regardless, takes another spare. He's at 46 and a bonus after 3. Anthony Leonardi takes a 9 for 29 after 3. Yes, my apologies on not seeing that third pin. Portsmouth is one of those houses where on the zoom cam, there's some crazy optical illusions going on for some of the pins sometimes, so visually it just may be hard to recount that. Steve Kelly punches 2 out on the right side, half Worcester, 3 in the 9 for a 2 fill on that spare for 48 after 3. Anthony Leonardi takes 3 pins out on the right side for a Candlepin corner, and the second ball he does the opposite on the left side, leaving the center. Steve Kelly punches the head pin, and only the head pin effectively. And I think 1 extra pin in the back row. Anthony Leonardi takes a 10 box, 39 after 4. Steve Kelly does the best he can, does the best that he possibly can with that leave. Leaves the 7, 4, and 6 for a 7 box. That puts him at 55 after 4. And again, Anthony Leonardi with his third 10 of the game in the 4th box is at 39. With 1 box to go before these 2 bowlers sit, and we say hello to Steve Poulin and Tom Grasso once again. Steve Kelly has an average of 118.8 this season. As of round 5, he has a home average of 114.1 and an away average of 122.0 as of round 5. Anthony Leonardi to the right of the head pin. He leaves 3 on the deck. 1, 2, 4, Steve Kelly punches out the center, another spread eagle. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 10. Anthony Leonardi takes a few more out, but gets no mark. Steve Kelly breaks most of the eagle, but leaves 2 pins, 2 and 4 on the deck. Leonardi misses, takes an 8 box in the 5th for 47 after 5. Steve Kelly will pin it out for a 10 for 65 in 5. That's the end of the half for both of our bowlers. Steve Kelly, 65 after 5. Anthony Leonardi, 47 after 5. Anthony Leonardi is markless in this first half. Steve Kelly has 3 marks in the first, second, and third box, respectively. But he breaks the perfect streak with that 4th box being a 7. It had to come to an end at some point, but it took nearly a game and a half to do so. As the visual score indicators are being updated by past Steve Kelly of the match, we have Tom Grasso, who was slightly off the headpin, and that's Steve Poulin opening with another strike. He's at 10 and a bonus after 1. Tom Grasso looking to clean up. His first ball was slightly off target. The second one is on the headpin, but he leaves the 8. The center pile of pins. So with 1 pin remaining, he fires. And he'll take it for a 10 box. Grasso at 10 after 1, and Poulin at 10 after 1, plus a bonus with that strike. Steve Poulin carries a record of 33 and 23. At home, he's 22 and 20. When he's away, he's 11 and 3. Tom Grasso drops 6, leaves a banana split, 4, 6, 7, 10. Steve Poulin to the left of the headpin, 7 so far, and his strike fill, 1, 3, 6. Tom Grasso has a season record of 49 and 49. He's in Class D North Division 2. He has a home average of 32 and 10, and an away record of 17 and 39. Grasso plays the right of the banana split. Poulin misses everything. Takes a 7 on the strike fill for 17 after 1. Grasso cleans up the second half of the banana split for a 10 box, 20 after 2, and Poulin will clean up for a 10 box of his own for 27 after 2. Tom Grasso recently faced Mark Welch in round 7. He took 10 points with a 520 series. He had 1 strike, 12 spares, and 7 tens. His best game was a 114, and that's a strike for Tom Grasso. Right when he needed it. He's perfect so far. 30 and a fill after 3. Steve Poulin drops 8, leaves the 4 and the 8. The 4 pin slid a little bit. Steve Poulin recently faced Cody 50 in Portsmouth, and he took 4 points. 136, 103, 107, 103, and 101 for Steve Poulin in that match. Steve Poulin will take a spare, 37 and a bonus after 3. Steve Poulin took 4 points against Cody 50 in round 4. He had 2 strikes, 12 spares, and 8 tens. Steve Poulin has won 600 match so far this season. That was round 1 against Dino Dellis at Boutwell's. He threw a 615. And that's Tom Grasso with an 8 drop, leaves the 2 and the 5, and Steve Poulin will lemon drop the 4 pin, 1 fill on his spare for 38 after 3. Tom Grasso for his strike fill, it's going to be a 9 fill. It almost like it was going to be a spare, but the 5 pin stays. Steve Poulin takes a few more out, leaves the 5, 7, and 8 on lane 19. Tom Grasso for the 10 box, he'll bean the 5 to take the 10 box. That'll put him at 49 after 4, and Steve Poulin with that 9 box. It looks like he'll be at 47 after 4. Tom Grasso's best series this season so far was in round 1 against Robert Creevy, in which he took 10 points. It was also the game where he threw his high single of 127. Now Tom Grasso, 1 more frame before he sits at the start of the half of the second game here. End of the first half of the second game, that is. He's to the left of the head pin, drops a few pins. Steve Poulin is on the head pin, drops 9, leaves the 5 pin. Grasso, and he's slightly off target to the right of the head pin, leaves the 1 and the 10. No mark for Tom Grasso. Leaves the 1 and the 10 with some wood all around it, still settling, still rolling as it does in Portsmouth. The synthetic decks at the end of the lanes in Portsmouth likely contribute to that extra action. As you can see, normally the decks are kind of like a black color, but here they're the same color and texture as the rest of the lane. Just something that's kind of interesting. Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama used to be more of a traditional wood alley back in the older days, I remember. And that's a spare for Steve Poulin, by the way. That's 57 and a bonus after 5. Grasso on the 1 and the 10 for the 10 box, he'll take a 9. Grasso 57 after 5. Steve Poulin 57 after 5 and a bonus. That's where we are after 5. So Steve Kelly is up in the game by 8, minus Steve Poulin's bonus. Tom Grasso is up in the game by 10 against Anthony Leonardi. But we'll now say hello once again to Anthony Leonardi and Steve Kelly as they prepare to take the approaches one more time. This time, Steve Kelly will be on lane 20 on the right, and Anthony Leonardi will be on lane 19 on the left. Steve Kelly will start off first. In round 5, Steve Kelly faced Dino Dellis, and for the first time in the season, he took fewer than 7 points, taking 5 points and taking 9 points of losses. He had a 538 series, lowest this season. And Steve Kelly drops 9, leaving 4 on the deck. Anthony Leonardi wild pitch to the right, takes the 10 pin and only the 10 pin. Kelly on the 4 pin with a piece of wood perpendicular to it. He beans it for a spare. Steve Kelly has another spare in the 6th. That puts him at 75 and a bonus after 6. Leonardi, no such luck on the second ball. Still trying to work on getting something better than a 6 box at this point. He's got the 1, the 2, the 4, and the 8 pins on the deck. And after thinking long and hard about it, Leonardi fires. Bit of a weird right hook to that ball, but he'll take a 9 box, leaving the 8 pin for 56 in 6 for Anthony Leonardi. And that puts Anthony Leonardi 10 under Tom Grasso in the 6th frame, 56 to 66. In the 6th frame, Steve Kelly is over Steve Poulin by 4. No, he is not. To be continued, 65 and a bonus. That's right, it was on a spare. That's a 2 fill now for Steve Kelly. He's at 77, up by 4 over Poulin in the 6th. Leonardi drops 7 on the head pin. Steve Kelly on the spare bid leaves 1 pin on the deck. It's the 5 pin in the center, the king pin. Leonardi on the 1, the 7, and the 10. Takes 1 more out, leaves the rest. Kelly for a 10 box on the king pin. He'll take it. That's a 10 box for Steve Kelly. With that 2 fill in the 6th, that put him at 77 and 6 and 87 and 7 with that 10 box. Leonardi responds as well with a 10 box. That puts him at 66 and 7. Kelly will start first. Kelly fires. On the head pin on the 1-2 pocket. It's a strike for Steve Kelly. Would you believe it? That's the first strike for Steve Kelly of the match so far. 97 and a bonus. Anthony Leonardi drops a few, leaves some on the deck. Not on the head pin. He was off to the left. Leonardi looks to clean up for the spare, and he leaves a pin in the center. It was a valiant effort, but that's just how it goes sometimes. Thinking long and hard about it once again, Anthony Leonardi now fires. And he'll take out, oh, there were 2 pins. It was the 1 and the 5 pin. He'll take out the last 2 for a 10 box. So Anthony Leonardi's at 76 after 8. Steve Kelly's at 97 and a bonus after 8. Steve Kelly, the next 2 balls are bonus balls on the strike. First ball is a split, 7-10, 4-3, 6 down so far. Anthony Leonardi drops 6, not on the head pin, but leaves the 1, the 5, the 2, and the 9. Kelly's shooting on the 7-10, 4-3. And he's just slightly off to the right of the object pin, only takes the 10. That'll be a 7 fill on the strike for 104 and 8. Anthony Leonardi's spare bid happens now. He fires, and he's on it. Excuse me, not a spare bid, 10 bid. 76 and 8 for Anthony. No, I can't read a scoreboard today. Excuse me. 86 and a bonus for Anthony Leonardi in the 9th. Steve Kelly will take an 8 box for 112 in the 9th. My apologies for that. Talking about Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama, that's where we are today, located at Portsmouth, New Hampshire at 595 Lafayette Road, established in 1956 by the Genomatis family. In 2018, the Medeiros family took ownership and undertook significant renovations to modernize and expand the facility. Bowl-O-Rama offers Candlepin bowling, cosmic bowling, an arcade called Asteroids Game Zone, and a full-service restaurant called Shenanigans. There are 22 lanes at Bowl-O-Rama. That's a 7 fill on... That's a 9 fill on Anthony Leonardi's spare, by the way. 95 after 9. Steve Kelly drops 7, leaves the right side triangle, the 6, 9, 10. And Kelly fires on lane 20 for the spare. He's on the object pin, but he leaves the 10. Sometimes the triangles are hard to break. They just break oddly, even if you hit the object pin correctly. But Anthony Leonardi will take a spare. That's 105 and a bonus in the 10th. Steve Kelly shooting for a 10 box, 9 box minimum. Potential 121 or 122, and it'll be a fouled 9 box. Steve Kelly will finish with a 121 for a 2-game total of 284. Anthony Leonardi has 1 more fill ball to go. Currently at 105 and a bonus. Bowl-O-Rama has 22 lanes. I believe there used to be 28 before the renovation in 2018. They have birthday parties, corporate events, and leagues. Pretty busy place on the weekends. And Anthony Leonardi pins are still mixing, and it looks like it's going to be a 6 fill for 111 for Anthony Leonardi. That will finish him at a 2-game total of 220 with a 109 in the first game and a 111 in the second game. Steve Kelly at a 163 in the first game and a 121 in the second game. And now, in a brief transition period here, we are now just getting ready for Tom Grasso and Steve Poulin to continue the second game here. They will be starting the last 5 boxes of the second game to close out the second game for all 4 of our bowlers today. Again, you're watching the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, this Class D and A action. This is Anthony Leonardi at Tom Grasso and Steve Kelly at Steve Poulin. And Steve Poulin on the right in the blue drops 6. That's the 1, 3, 9, 10. And for the spare bid, he just misses it. He leaves the 9. Tom Grasso dropped 7. He wasn't on the head pin. That's the 1, the 2, and the 10. Tom Grasso for his spare bid. Oh, and there was a sleeper pin. The 8 pin was back there too. And Steve Poulin will clean up for a 10 box. In the 6th, he's at 73. Tom Grasso will finish with a 9 for 66 in 6. That's a lot of 6s for Tom Grasso in the 6th. But Tom Grasso is up by 10 over Anthony Leonardi's 56 in the 6th box. Steve Poulin trails Steve Kelly by 4, 73 to 77 in the 6th. And there's a wayward piece of wood down there on the lanes that just needs to be cleared. So we will pause for some lane maintenance as one of Steve Poulin's kids goes down to retrieve the lumber and safely slide it out of play. Many thanks. So talking about Bowl-O-Rama, there's also a very well-stocked pro shop at Bowl-O-Rama in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. If you are in the market for bowling balls in particular, this is definitely the place to go. They always advertise that anything on display is in stock, and that's always great. So you can point at something and get instant gratification if you want to buy it. Bowl-O-Rama hosted ICBA youth Candlepin tournaments in the early and mid-2000s. I know because I bowled in them back when I was in the junior leagues. And also check out Bowl-O-Rama.com for more details on all of this. Steve Poulin drops 9, leaves the 7 pin on the deck, and he plays the wood. And oddly enough, the wood does not go to the 7 pin. Ball stays on the deck. Tom Grasso, spare bid, leaves the 5 and the 7. Steve Poulin shooting for the 10 box, and he just misses the 7. That's going to be a 9 box for Steve Poulin. That's 82 in 7. Tom Grasso playing the left side setback on the wood, and he will get it. The deck was very generous to push the wood and the pin. Tom Grasso is at 76 after 7. He's ahead of Anthony Leonardi by 10. Steve Poulin is at 82 and 7, down by 5 to Steve Kelly's 87 and 7. Steve Poulin fires on the right side on lane 20. Not on the headpin, gets a generous mix. I believe it's the 1, the 5, and the 2 down there, if I'm not mistaken. The sleeper pins are really, really hard to see, as you can probably tell on the pin cam, so forgive me if I miss one here and there. And Steve Poulin looks to get a spare, but he's off to the right and hits nothing. Tom Grasso, he's off target as well. He leaves the 1 and the 2 on the deck. Poulin, it was just the 1 and the 2 pin, but he'll take a 10 box. He'll miss the second and get the third. You know the rest of the lyrics. And Tom Grasso will leave pins on the table. For 84 after 8, Steve Poulin is at 92 after 8. Compare that to Steve Kelly's 104 and 8. And Anthony Leonardi has 76 and 8 at the same point in the match. Steve Poulin fires. He's off target. It's the 1, 3, 7, 9, 10. And Tom Grasso, he's also off the headpin but drops 7, leaves the 1, 2, 5. Poulin 1, 3, 7, 9, 10. And he fires on the pocket, but he leaves the 7. It was a pretty shot. By all rights, it should have gone. Tom Grasso, the sleeper pin, 8 pin in the back row, stays on his spare bid. My apologies if I didn't point that out. Again, these are a little bit hard to see. And Poulin will take a 10 box. Nice hard fought 10 box, 102 and 9. And with that 10 box for Tom Grasso, he's at 94 in 9. As we listen to some birthday announcements at Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama. Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama, a big popular place for birthday parties, especially for kids. And Poulin is on the 1-2 pocket, and he drops a definitive 9, leaves the 9 pin on the deck. Tom Grasso on the 1-3 pocket, he drops 8, leaving the 4 and the 7 with a piece of wood across the 4, and partially across the 7. Poulin playing the wood, he will take the 9 for a spare in the 10th for 112 and a ball. And Tom Grasso, he's on it as well for his own spare for 104 and a ball. In the 10th, both bowlers get to bowl 1 additional bonus ball to close out the second game at Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama. The final fill balls here. Steve Kelly's at 121. Poulin could surpass him if he gets a 10 fill and tie with a 9 fill. Steve Poulin will fire first. The shotgun snap, he fires. He's off target, and it's going to be a 7 fill for 119, a 2-game total of 253 for Steve Poulin. Tom Grasso will drop 8, and he'll finish with an 8 fill for 112 in the 10th. So where does that leave us? At the end of the game, Steve Kelly is at a 2-game total of 284, up in the total by 31 over Steve Poulin's 253, and Anthony Leonardi is only up in the total by 220 to Tom Grasso's 218, and Tom Grasso took the second game by just 1, while Steve Kelly took the second game against Steve Poulin by just 2, so these are super competitive matches here on the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. 2 games of 5 complete. 3 games to go. Stay tuned. I'm Steve Kelly on the call after the fact. It's great to have you along. Again, this is the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, a doubleheader, Class D and A. And we will be starting out the third game here in just a couple of seconds. We have Anthony Leonardi in the black on lane 20, which is the right lane in our pair of lanes. The right lane starts first. And Steve Kelly in the navy blue shirt will be starting out on the left lane on lane 19. Anthony Leonardi's home house is Academy Lanes in Haverhill, Massachusetts. He's in Class D Division 4. He's bowled 7 matches so far, again with a record of 48 and 50, and he leads off on the headpin, drops 6. That's the 7-10-4-5. Steve Kelly's off to the left of the headpin, and it looks like it's a 5 drop, 1-3-6-7-10 on lane 19. Very enthusiastic kid to the left of Steve Kelly, dancing around. Anthony Leonardi with a piece of wood in front of the 5-pin, the kingpin, hoping to make something happen with a pretty looking spare, with causing the pins to skate around, and it nearly goes. The 4-pin falls. Look at that. Anthony Leonardi with a fantastic skating spare on lane 20. At the top of the third game, Steve Kelly punches out the center, leaves everything else. punches out the right side this time, leaves the 7 on the deck. Steve Kelly is at 9 after 1. Anthony Leonardi with that spare is at 10 and a bonus after 1 at the top of the 3rd. Fantastic action here on the tour on a Sunday afternoon in Portsmouth, New Hampshire at Bowl-O-Rama. Leonardi fires, he's filling his spare, and oof, that was a wild pitch to the right on the 10 pin. Steve Kelly off to the right of the head pin, not as much, but drops 6. 1, 2, 7, 8. Anthony Leonardi corrects a little bit, but doesn't correct enough. He punches out the 3 and the 9 now, so he has got 3 down. Steve Kelly's off target, leaves the head pin. A piece of wood coming towards the head pin. It could go. We never know with this alley, but the head pin does stay after all said and done. Anthony Leonardi is on the 1-2 pocket that time, cleans up for a 9 box. Steve Kelly will clean up for a 10 box meanwhile. 19 after 2 for Steve Kelly with that 10 box. And 20 after 2 for Anthony Leonardi. Folks, if you think Candlepin bowling is your thing and you want to give it a try, check out candlepin.org. Click Go Bowling to find your nearest center. That's Steve Kelly on the head pin, dropping 9. Anthony Leonardi was off to the left of the head pin, left the 4 horseman runs right side, the 1, 3, 6, 10 on the deck. Leonardi will be shooting for a spare, as will Steve Kelly. Steve Kelly has a whole lumber yard of wood to the left of to the right of the 7 pin. It's almost too much wood. It's sort of a situation where you could almost say that hitting anywhere will take the pin, but at the same time, it's an incredibly risky prospect. Anthony Leonardi, though, runs down the right side 4 horsemen. That was a fantastic spare by Anthony Leonardi, and Steve Kelly will be in the 7 pin for a spare of his own. Both bowlers on spares. Steve Kelly 29 and a ball after 3. Anthony Leonardi 30 and a ball after 3. And it's funny, during doubleheaders, and especially if they're not head-to-head, sometimes if you have like Class A and Class D, sometimes the other class, Class D, will often rise to the occasion and sometimes match or surpass Class A. I've seen that many times. Sometimes when I've even streamed matches, I was like, wow, the Class D or Class C or B or E or whatever sometimes outclass the upper class, if that makes any sense. Anyways, Anthony Leonardi had a 7 fill on his spare, and he's still working on everything. He's got the 5 pin. Steve Kelly with a 5 fill and turns it into just an awkward split. Anthony Leonardi will take a 10 for 47 after 4. Steve Kelly working on a 7 on the high-low jack, the 1-7-10, the WCVB TV shot, but he misses it. Leaves the 1-7-10 unharmed for a 7 box, and 41 after 4 for Steve Kelly. With 1 box to go before these bowlers sit already. Impressive scores from both our bowlers so far. Anthony Leonardi is off to the right of the head pin, and Steve Kelly is on the head pin. Pins are still mixing. It's almost a strike. The 5 pin stands tall, but has a piece of wood perpendicular to it. It's all set up for him. Anthony Leonardi on the 1-2-4-5-9. He leaves the 5. Steve Kelly will take out the single for a spare. He's at 51 and a spare fill in the 5th. Anthony Leonardi looking to clean up for a 10 box, 9 box minimum guaranteed. Anthony Leonardi will take a 5 box of, a 10 box of his own in the 5th for 57 in 5 for Anthony Leonardi. Steve Kelly at 51 in a bonus. Anthony Leonardi at 57 closed at the end of the 5th. That's the end of the first half of the 3rd game for 2 of our 4 bowlers. We now switch to Tom Grasso and Steve Poulin next. And we just pause for some lane maintenance one more time as Tom Grasso picks up a wayward bowling ball in the middle of the lane. Don't often see that. So Tom Grasso just performing some cleanup as the scores are visually being keyed in. Again, Steve Kelly of the past was just unable to score the bowlers bowling while he was bowling, so that's why there are a little bit of a couple of delayed entries in terms of these scores. But they do go in eventually. Anyways, that's Tom Grasso on the left. He missed the head pin and took out 3 pins. Half Worcester Bliss DLC. Steve Poulin is on the head pin. Drops 7, 3, 9, 10 on the deck for him. That's a spare possibility for Steve Poulin. Tom Grasso with a difficult pile of pins to work with. He's on the 1-3 pocket, though. It was a good bid. He leaves the 7-9-10, though. Steve-Poulin a little bit too full on the 3-9. Punches only the 3-9, leaves the 10 on the deck. Tom Grasso, 7-box guarantee. 10-box possibility with a bunch of wood all around. We'll see what happens here. And Grasso will fire on lane 20, and oh my goodness, he'll somehow send the ball through the one void on the lane for a 7-box. And Steve-Poulin will take a 9-box. That was a fouled 9. It says 10 up on the scoreboard for just a moment, but Steve-Poulin signaled that it was a foul, confirming with Steve Kelly, as you can see right there. I always appreciate the sportsmanship. It is often difficult to not only see fouls sometimes, but call them, so it's rather difficult as both a spectator and a bowler sometimes to kind of make that call. So I always appreciate the sportsmanship. If you definitively think it was a foul and you say so, that's always it's a great thing to see. So Tom Grasso with an inverse of what he just had. He's got the 7-8-10 this time with a bunch of wood in a much more favorable spot. Let's see if Tom Grasso can play it, but oh my goodness, the ball is off target. Sails through the void once again, almost in the same place as the previous box. Steve-Poulin on his spare bid, he leaves the 1, the 5, and the 9. Grasso on the retry, he plays the wood this time, but the 8-pin stays. He takes a 9-box. 16 after 2 for Tom Grasso. And Poulin cleaning up for a 10-box, and he will get that 10. The deadwood dances around and takes the last pin for 19 after 2 for Steve-Poulin. Kelly and Poulin are tied in the second, 19-19. Anthony Leonardi is up by 4 over Tom Grasso, 20-6 in the second frame. With 3 frames to go for these two bowlers here. Tom Grasso will lead off first. Grasso fires on the 1-2 pocket. Bit of a light hit, drops 6, 5, 6, 3, 10. Steve-Poulin is way off on the 6-10 pocket, but a piece of wood spins around and bounces off the left sidewall to take out almost everything else. Very generous mix for Steve-Poulin there, despite the misfire. Tom Grasso will fire on the 5 and leave the 3-6-10. Poulin. And wow, he takes a spare without ever hitting the target pin at all. He hit a piece of wood as a spectator who yells out, "What a read, Steve!" And I agree. That was a wild spare for Steve-Poulin. Sometimes you just don't even have to hit the target to get them. That's a spare 29 and a ball for Steve-Poulin in the third, and 25 after 3 for Tom Grasso as Steve Kelly of the pass yells over. That's how you get them singles. Hot singles near Steve-Poulin right there. So Tom Grasso, 25 after 3, 7-9-9. He fires. He's on the 1-2 pocket, a better mix this time. He's got the 5 and the 3 to contend with wood all around it. That looks like a layup possibility for a spare. Steve-Poulin drops 8 on his fill. That's 37 after 3 for Steve-Poulin, leaving the 4 and the 7 on the pocket that time. No debate about that. Tom Grasso takes a spare, and he's triumphant on that one. That's 35 and a ball for Tom Grasso, and Steve-Poulin will take a spare of his own. That's 47 after 4 and a bonus. Marks all over the board for all of our bowlers right now. Tom Grasso and Steve-Poulin are both on spare fills, and they'll be filling them now. Tom Grasso's on the head pin. The 6-pin falls last. It's a strike. It's a 10 fill and a strike for Tom Grasso. 55 and a bonus on the 5th. That's a great one to sit on. Great one for the seats. Steve-Poulin for his spare fill, and he drops. He's on the pocket. It should have really been a hammer strike, but he drops 6. That's a 5, 6, 9, 10 versus Steve-Poulin. That's a 6 fill, 53 after 4. Should be a pretty decent spare opportunity, but that wood rolling away, the farther away it gets, the less of a chance you have for that to come and take everything out. So it's going to be definitely a spray and pray for Steve-Poulin as he fires, and he plays the wood, caps it, takes the 10, and leaves everything else. So Steve-Poulin will not get a spare. Some shots are just unfair in Candlepin bowling, and that was one of them. Final ball of the half for Steve-Poulin, and the final ball of the half for all of our bowlers in the third. That's a 7-box for Steve-Poulin. That will put him at 60 after 5. So where are we at the end of everything? Steve-Poulin is at 60 after 5, and Steve Kelly's at 51 and a ball after 5, so it's a close match there. Anthony Leonardi, 57 after 5. Tom Grasso, a staggering 55, and 2 bonus balls with that strike on spare in the 5th. Halfway through the third game, officially the halfway point of the match right here. And Steve Kelly and Anthony Leonardi will continue the march on the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour here. Competitive matches. Steve Kelly on the right side. When Steve Kelly is away, his record is 32-10 as of round 5. 1830 total pins went away. Steve Kelly's on the 1-2 pocket, a definitive 9 drop. The 5 pin is the last one standing. Kelly will fill with 9. That puts him at 60 after 5, and Anthony Leonardi drops 7. That's the 1-2-10 on the deck. So Steve Kelly looking to go lights out on the single pin spare bid, and he fires, and it does go. That's a spare for Steve Kelly. That's 70 after 6 plus a bonus. Leonardi on the 1-2-10, and he just misfires completely. Doesn't hit any pins. So he has a guaranteed 7 box. Can he make it 67 with this 10 box? He fires, and he will. He'll miss the second, get the third. You know the rest of the song. That's 67 after 6 for Anthony Leonardi. Steve Kelly stands at 70 and a bonus in the 6th. That's Steve Kelly's 3rd mark of the game. Anthony Leonardi has 2 marks in the game so far. Here in the second half of the 3rd game again. The scores are not visually updating because Steve Kelly was the score operator, but also the bowler. And Kelly fires on the headpin, a way too full, and that's a spread eagle, a 4-pin spread eagle and a 4 fill for 74 and 6 for Steve Kelly. Anthony Leonardi, he fires, and he's to the left of the headpin, and he drops what appears to be 6. I think it's the 1-3-9-8. Possibly just the 1-3-8. Hard to see from back here. Steve Kelly fires on the 4 and takes only the 4. And Leonardi, oh, it was the 1-3-8, but he'll take all of them for a spare. That's 77 and a bonus in the 7th for Anthony Leonardi. Steve Kelly's looking at the 7-10, 6-2-3. Spread eagle minus the 4, effectively. Steve Kelly's just trying to fire to get anything. He'll take the right side, take 3 and leave 2 for an 8 box. That's 82 after 7 for Steve Kelly. So with some unfortunate luck there, kind of ends the run of marks there, but we'll see where things go. Leonardi's 77 and a bonus in the 7th. His next ball will be a fill. Steve Kelly's on the headpin, and he drops it again, nearly a strike. The 6-pin's wiggling. It almost goes. It's like a 9.5 drop. Good positioning for a single pin spare with the wood, and Anthony Leonardi is off target to the right. Takes a few pins out. 1-5, 2, 8, 4, 7, 9 for Anthony Leonardi. Steve Kelly plays the wood with the single and gets it for a spare. That's 92 and a bonus and 8 for Steve Kelly. Anthony Leonardi looking to clean up for a spare, and he leaves the head pin. It was the only pin he didn't connect with. Took everything else out in the back. So Steve Kelly's at 92 and a bonus after 8. Anthony Leonardi is shooting on the head pin, the last pin standing, for a 9 or a 10 box, guaranteed 9, and the ball is wildly off target. He'll take a 9 for 89 and 8. Still doing quite well given his average. Anthony Leonardi's average normally is 98.2. When he's away, it's 99.7. So he's still on target to go far and away above average. 89 and 8 for Leonardi, 92 and a bonus for Steve Kelly in the 8th. Steve Kelly completing the 8th box with his bonus ball. He's on the pocket, and it will be an 8 fill for 108 now for Steve Kelly. Leaving the 5 and the 8, and Anthony Leonardi, it is a strike for Anthony Leonardi, 99 and a bonus in 9 for Anthony Leonardi. A 1 pin gets tapped at the end and falls late. Steve Kelly shooting for a spare on the 5 and the 8, and he fires. There's wood all around it, and it all goes. So that's 110 in 9 for Steve Kelly in a bonus. 99 in a bonus for Anthony Leonardi. It's just lights out marks here on out pretty much. Both our bowlers fantastic so far with the marks. Steve Kelly has 4 spares. 5 spares, excuse me, up to this point. Anthony Leonardi with that strike has 4 marks in this game. just this game, the third game. Steve Kelly fires on the head pin. He's on the 1-3 pocket once again. Pin still mixing. It looks like it's going to be, I believe, a 7 fill. And Leonardi so far, it might be a 6 fill. I think there's a sleeper behind it. Leonardi drops 7 so far. Yes, it was a 6 fill for Steve Kelly, but he spares it up. That's 126 and a bonus in the 10th for Steve Kelly. Leonardi's second ball will complete a strike fill. He could get a spare here with that 7 down and 3 up, 136 in the 9th. Second ball for a spare, and oh, I think he thought about just a little bit too much. He connects with the 3 and leaves the 1 and the 6. That's an 8 fill for 107 and 9 for Anthony Leonardi. And Leonardi fires. He'll take a 9 box for 116. Game 3 for Anthony Leonardi for a 3-game total of 336. 109, 111, 116 for Anthony Leonardi. Steve Kelly has 1 more ball to go to finish the third game. It's a fill on the spare. 126 and a bonus. As we just pause while Anthony Leonardi just clears a gutter. Wayward piece of wood way out of play. To close out the third game between Steve Kelly and Anthony Leonardi. Still waiting on just some gutter clearance and some Candlepin comedy going on down there. Anthony Leonardi is going to end up just resetting the lane, I believe. And Steve Kelly's final bonus ball is off to the right of the head pin, but pins are still falling. It's going to be a 7 fill for 133 after 10 for Steve Kelly. For a 4-game total of 417. That is 163, 121, and 133 for Steve Kelly. So the benchmarks are set for Steve Poulin and Tom Grasso, the home bowlers of these matchups today, to match or exceed. So the scores will be going in visually in just a moment. Appreciate your patience on that, and just providing the audio score details because I happen to have a bit of a cheat sheet in front of me because this is being recorded in post-production. So those will go in just a moment. You see the confirmed 133 for Steve Kelly right there, and then Anthony Leonardi will have a 116 once it's keyed in. Steve Poulin, all the while, he's off to the right of the head pin, and he drops 6 so far, the 4 horsemen left side. Tom Grasso on the left on lane 19 drops 7-1, 7-10-4. And Steve Poulin kind of misses his target, but piece of wood almost takes the 2, and the 1 is still there. No mark for Steve Poulin in the 6th. Grasso, and he'll play the wood and take the 10, but will have an 8 box for 71 and 6. Steve Poulin in the 6th will take an 8 for 68 in the 6th. Steve Kelly was at 74 in the 6th compared to Steve Poulin 68. And Anthony Leonardi at 67 in the 6th compared to Tom Grasso's 71 in the 6th. Again, Steve Kelly with a 3-game total of 417. Anthony Leonardi a 3-game total of 336. And Steve Poulin drops 9, leaves the 10 on the deck. Tom Grasso is off to the left, drops 3, left side Candlepin corner. Steve Poulin has to fire on the 10 pin for a spare. It's a single pin spare shot. Whole bunch of wood to the left of the 10 pin. And that's a spare for Steve Poulin. 20 after, 78 and a ball. 78 and a ball for Steve Poulin in the 7th. Tom Grasso looking to clean up for a 10 box, and he will. That's 81 and 7 for Tom Grasso. So Steve Poulin has a little bit of work to do here. Has to get a run of marks to match Steve Kelly's 133. Tom Grasso, meanwhile, just needs to get to 116 or higher. And Steve Poulin drops 7 on his spare fill for 85 and 7. Tom Grasso is off to the left of the head pin, drops 6. 1, 3, 6, and 8 are on the deck for Tom Grasso. And Steve Poulin for the spare bid, and he threw it a little bit too hard, punched a little bit too full on the wood in front of the 4, and took only the 4, leaving the 6 and the 7. Tom Grasso takes the 136, leaves the 8. Steve Poulin will pin it out for a 9-box for 94 and 8. Tom Grasso will just narrowly miss the 8-pin for a 9-box. That should put him at 90 after 8. Steve Kelly 100, Steve Poulin 94 at the equivalent point in the game. Anthony Leonardi 89, Tom Grasso 90 at the equivalent point in the game at the 8th box. Steve Poulin is off to the right of the headpin. He drops 5, leaves 5. Tom Grasso again with a left side candlepin corner takes out the 7, the 8, and the 4. Steve Poulin looking to clean up, and he's on the headpin, but the dancing wood just does not really want to play nice on the 4 and the 7, so no mark for Steve Poulin. Tom Grasso's mark bid, he fires. Just a little bit off tails just towards the end, but the pins are still mixing, but no mark for Tom Grasso. Steve Poulin will pin it out for a 10-box and put him at 104 and 9. Tom Grasso, it looks like it should be a single pin shot for a 10-box. And he fires. And he'll take that 10-box for 109 for Tom Grasso. Down by 7 to Anthony Leonardi's 107 in the 9th. Steve Poulin down by 12 in the 9th. 104 to Steve Kelly's 116. Steve Poulin drops 8. The 6 and the 8 are on the deck with a piece of wood in front of the 6. Tom Grasso is on the 1-2 pocket. It was a nice shot. 7, 9, 5 are on the deck on lane 19. Poulin for a difficult spare bid. You got to kind of bounce the right side dead wood, but he hits it in the wrong spot. Only takes a 6-pin, leaves the 8-pin. Tom Grasso trying to clean up for a spare, can't quite do it. He's left with a 5-7 again. And Steve Poulin will take a 10 for... That will put him at 114. So Steve Kelly will take the third game. Tom Grasso finishes with a 110 with that 10-box, but Anthony Leonardi will take the third game with the 116. 3-game total of 328 for Tom Grasso. 3-game total of 367 for Steve Poulin. Steve Poulin 134, 119, 114. Tom Grasso 106, 112, 110 for a 328. At the end of the third, Steve Kelly is up ahead in the total by 50 and took the third game by 19. And then Anthony Leonardi is up in the total by 8 and took the third game by 6. Those are your leaders. Those are your score updates provided by the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Steve Kelly currently has 6 points. Anthony Leonardi has 4 points. Tom Grasso has 2 points. Steve Poulin is currently pointsless. Not pointless, pointless. Always like to make a point about that. Be sure to strike, comment, and subscribe for more awful dad jokes. Anyways, we are going to move on to the 4th game here on the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Game 4 of 5. It's great to have you along with us again. I'm Steve Kelly on the call, recording after the fact. Steve Kelly is also bowling. We are the same person, but I just like to differentiate and use some third-person references. So Anthony Leonardi is off the headpin. He drops a few. Steve Kelly's on the headpin, drops 6. That's the 9-10... 9-10-3-6 if I'm not mistaken. Camera angle makes it a little bit hard to determine that. Anthony Leonardi is just off target, no mark for him. And Steve Kelly for the spare, and oh my goodness, it was on the object pins, but he leaves the 10 on the deck. Anthony Leonardi will clean up for a 10-box, 10 after 1. And Steve Kelly will match. He'll do the same. Both bowlers 10 after 1 so far. Game 4 or 5 in the first half. So folks, if you like this content and want to see more, I invite you to check out the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour page on Facebook, as well as Candlepin Bowling Network on YouTube, 3 Ball Spare on YouTube, Candlepin Corner on YouTube, and we'll talk about about even more socials later on. Steve Kelly with a 9 drop, Anthony Leonardi with a 4 drop, if I'm not mistaken. And Anthony Leonardi's spare bid is a little off target. Not sure what happened there, but the ball went wildly to the right. Steve Kelly in the single pin 10-box shot and 10-pin shot, and he'll take it for a spare. That's 20 after 2 for Steve Kelly. Anthony Leonardi looking to clean up. He drops everything but the 10-pin, so no spare for Anthony Leonardi, but he will take a 9. No 10-box, but he'll take a 9 for 19 after 2. 19 after 2 for Anthony Leonardi. 20 and a ball for Steve Kelly at the end of the second frame. Anthony Leonardi, he looks to wind up. The shotgun snap, he fires on the 1-2 pocket. That's a definitive strike for Anthony Leonardi right there. 29 and a bonus after 3. Great shot right there. Great action. It was a fast-moving strike. Kelly's looking to fill a spare right now. 20 after 2. He fires. Fast ball. Leaves the 5-7 for an 8 fill. 28 after 2 for Steve Kelly. It's going to be a difficult shot. It's a left side setback, the 5 and the 7. And Kelly fires on the 5-7, and he'll play the wood on the 5. And it won't come to take the 7. It was a great shot, but it's about the best you can do with that one. It looks good for maybe a millisecond, but it just didn't go. And Kelly will just barely stay on for the 10 box. The ball was really riding the side of that edge of the gutter, but he'll take it for 10 box. That's 38 after 3 for Steve Kelly. Anthony Leonardi with a strike, 29, and a bonus after 3. Leonardi fires on the 1-3 pocket, and it's almost a double strike. Wow, 9 drop. Wood all around the 5. So far he's at 38 and counting in the 3rd. Next ball will complete the fill. Steve Kelly overthrows a little bit to the right. And a piece of wood's out of play. I believe it's a 7 drop. 1-2-7 on the deck. Anthony Leonardi, his ball is just off target, unfortunately. It was kind of a gimme on a single pin shot, but unfortunately it just doesn't go. The 5-pin stays. It's going to be a 9 fill and 38 after 3 for Anthony Leonardi, as Steve Poulin very generously goes down to retrieve the pin that is out of play. He's going to go pick that up and remove it from the lane. In the rule book, there is a certain line down there, and if the pin crosses it, it is out of play. Steve Kelly shooting at the 1-2-7, I believe. If there is not a sleeper pin behind, we'll find out. And Kelly, there was not. Steve fires, on, but he only takes the 1 and the 7, leaves the 2. No mark for Steve Kelly. Anthony Leonardi shooting for a 10 box now, but he misses on the 3rd ball as well for a 9 box. 47 after 4 for Anthony Leonardi. Steve Kelly shooting on the 2 pin for a 10 box. As we pause for a brief delay. Never want to run anybody over. That would not be good television. Steve Kelly on the 2 pin. Fires on the 2 pin, takes the 2 pin for a 10 box. 48 after 4 for Steve Kelly. 47 after 4 for Anthony Leonardi. 1 box to go before we conclude the first half of the 4th game for these 2 bowlers. And we say hello to Steve Poulin and Tom Grasso one more time. Anthony Leonardi on lane 20. And he fires on the 1-2 pocket. It's almost a strike. It is a strike for Anthony Leonardi. 2 strikes in the same half. 57 and a fill for Anthony Leonardi in the 5th. Steve Kelly drops 7. The 2, the 4, and the 7 on the deck. On lane 19 on the left, Steve Kelly in the navy blue shirt. On lane 19, he fires for the spare, and it's a bit of an overthrow. I think he kind of knew that when he released it. Leaves the 2 and the 4 on the deck. And Kelly on lane 19 shoots, and he'll take the 10. Close out for 58 after 5. So Steve Kelly, perfect half once again. 4 10s and 1 spare. 58 after 5 for Steve Kelly. Anthony Leonardi scoring higher, though, with 2 strikes, a 10, and 2 9s. That is 57 and a bonus for Anthony Leonardi. And we're just briefly pausing for returning the pin that was out of play down to its rightful position. It just didn't go into the gutter, so just waiting for a pin load and a reset. There it goes. Steve Kelly is entering the scores now. Again, 58 after 5 for Steve Kelly. And it should be 57 and a bonus for Anthony Leonardi. If my math was correct. We'll find out in just a moment. Tom Grasso and Steve Poulin are warming up, meanwhile, on lane 19 and 20. And Grasso is off to the right of the headpin. Drops a few, leaves a few. Poulin is on the 1-3 pocket, nearly a strike. Drops all but the 5-pin, single pin spare opportunity for Steve Poulin. Tom Grasso on lane 20. And it's a misfire. The ball tails to the left. He leaves the 1, the 2, and the 5 on the deck. Steve Poulin will be in the 5 for a spare, 10 after 1. and a bonus. Tom Grasso will pin everything out for a 10 of his own. 10 after 1 for Tom Grasso. And here's the scores again. Just showing them whenever we get a free moment. So 58 after 5 for Steve Kelly, 57 and a bonus for Anthony Leonardi. Steve-Poulin 10 and a bonus after 1. Tom Grasso 10 after 1. It's your score update for the fourth game. Grasso, and he fires on the 1-3 pocket. Decent mix, but a little bit light. Leaves the 7-8, 10-6. Steve-Poulin filling a spare. And he's a little full in the head pin, but gets a generous mix of 7 for 17 after 1. Tom Grasso fires on the right side on the wood and almost gets a spare, but leaves the 7 on the deck. Poulin on the 6-10. He fires and leaves the 8. So no mark for Steve-Poulin. No mark for either bowler, really. Tom Grasso on the 7 pin with 2 pieces of wood, kind of making the less than alligator symbol, if that makes any sense. Remember, like, second grade math. And Tom Grasso plays the wood, but it deflects everything. He's left with a 9 box for 19 after 2. Steve-Poulin firing. He'll take the 8 for a 10 box. That puts him at 27 after 2. With 3 boxes to go before these bowlers sit, and we move on to the second half of the fourth game here. This fourth game of 5 on the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Quite competitive at this point. Tom Grasso on the 1-2 pocket, a light hit, but he drops 6 after all said and done. 7, 9, 10, 6. Steve-Poulin's off to the left of the head pin. And it looks like he leaves the 4 horsemen right side if there are no sleeper pins in view. And Tom Grasso, great spare bid, but leaves the 7. Steve-Poulin, a little off target. It's the 1, the 5, and the 10. There was a sleeper pin back there, it seems. Tom Grasso will take a 10 box for 29 after 3. Steve-Poulin will take an 8 box for 35 after 3. My mistake, I apologize. There was no 5-pin sleeper pin. Again, really tough to see. Seems to be a 50-50 shot if I can guess if it's there or not. Tom Grasso on lane 20. And he fires. He's off to the left. Pins are still mixing, though. He gets a 6 drop. Steve-Poulin, he drops 9. He leaves the 10 on the deck on lane 19. Grasso on the head pin, and he gets a spare. Tom Grasso at 39 and a bonus after 4. Steve-Poulin on the single pin spare opportunity in the 10 pin with a piece of wood just diagonal of it. Poulin fires, but he misses it completely. I think he just thought it's one of those shots where you just, if you overthink, you're going to miss. I've been there 1,000 times. And Poulin fires, but he'll miss again. My goodness, overthinking it twice. So Poulin's at 44 after 4. Tom Grasso's at 39 and a bonus after 4. Poulin 21 for 34 on the head pin so far. And Grasso, late falling 9 drop, leaves the 10. Poulin punches the 2 and the 8 for a left side half Worcester. Tom Grasso's at a 9 fill for 48 after 4. The automatic score system has a bit of a system in which if the pins fall late, it may not count them. That's why we occasionally stop to score correct on the tablets down there. Tom Grasso for the follow-up spare shot, but he'll just... the wood will not mix correctly and the 10 pin stays. Poulin is a little off target, leaves the 1, the 5, the 4, and the 9 pins on the deck with no wood. Tom Grasso will clean up for a 10 box, though. That puts him at 58 after 5, and Steve-Poulin with that 6 box puts him at 50 after 5. We're at the end of the first half in the fourth game for all 4 of our bowlers. Steve Kelly up in the game by 8. Tom Grasso up in the game by 1. That's where we're at right now. Steve Kelly up in the match by 58, and Anthony Leonardi up in the total by 7. That's where we're at right now. It's 58 to 50, Kelly versus Poulin. and 57 and a bonus to 58, Leonardi versus Grasso. That's your score update at the first half of the fourth game, as we say hello once again to Anthony Leonardi on the left in the black and Steve Kelly in the right in the navy blue on lanes 19 and 20 at Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama. And now Anthony Leonardi and Steve Kelly will start out on lane 19 and 20 at Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama. And Steve Kelly fires. Opening ball is a shot on the 2 and the 8 pin. It's a left side half Worcester. A little too full, a little bit too punchy. Something we don't see often at Bowl-O-Rama. Anthony Leonardi all the while drops 9, a definitive 9 drop. The 6 pin is left on the deck with a piece of wood in front of it perpendicularly. 9 fills so far in his strike. Steve Kelly's a little bit full on the head pin, but makes the most of it. Leaves the 4, the 6, and the 7 on lane 20 at Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama. And Anthony Leonardi, that's a spare on strike. That's 67 and 5 for Anthony Leonardi, and then 77 and 5 plus a bonus. Steve Kelly with a 9 box. That puts him at 67 in 6. It's Anthony Leonardi, 3 marks so far this game. 2 strikes and a spare. 77 plus the next ball to finish off the 6th and start the 7th. Kelly not on a mark to start the 7th frame. His first ball on the 1-2 pocket. 4-6-3 on the deck with a piece of wood behind the 6. Going to be an interesting shot to convert. But Anthony Leonardi, he's filling a spare, and he fires right now. On the head pin, my goodness, that 6 pin's wiggling and wiggling and wiggling, but it's not going to fall. It's a 6 drop for Anthony Leonardi, the right side accordion, no wood. Steve Kelly on the 3-6-4, and it will go. The sidewall action and the deadwood bounce takes everything out. That was a nice shot. And great pin action, courtesy of Bowl-O-Rama in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Check it out, Bowl-O-Rama.com. And Anthony Leonardi will take the 5 and the 9 and leave the 6 and the 10 on lane 19. No mark, but it was a difficult shot to really convert. I think I've seen it go a handful of times, once in the Friday Night Pro League, I believe. I think Tony Delmonico, I believe, made that shot, if I'm not mistaken. And that was a match in the Friday Night Pro League that I covered. Go check that out over on Candlepin Bowling Network. That was at Central Park Lanes. So anyway, Steve Kelly is at 77 plus a bonus in the 6th. No, he's not. Just kidding. 77 and a bonus in the 7th. That's a 5 fill for Steve Kelly, 82 and 7. Was misreading the score towers on my cheat sheet here. Anthony Leonardi drops 8, leaves the 3 and the 10 on the deck. Here in the 7th frame. Steve Kelly on the 5, on the 4 horse on the right side and the 8, but all goes but the 10. It was a good looking shot, but the 10 pin just didn't get touched somehow. Anthony Leonardi on the 3 and the 10, he misses it completely, no mark. Steve Kelly for the 10 box, he will take the 10 for a 10. 92 and 8 for Steve Kelly. Anthony Leonardi on the 3 and the 10 for a 10 box now. And he'll miss it. He'll take an 8 box for 108 for Anthony Leonardi. 2 boxes to go before our home bowlers return to the approaches and close out game 4. Just waiting on a score correction and a brief issue there, but it was corrected. I think something with a sensor just got weird with the automatic score system, so it got corrected. We're just discussing that down there. I think both I got confused, and maybe it was just me who got confused. Who knows? Steve Kelly on lane 20 fires on the head pin 1-3 pocket, leaves the 7-8-4-6, the left side accordion with a piece of wood interweaving the 8 and the 5 and part of the 4th. Anthony Leonardi drops 6. That's the 2-4-7-10. Piece of wood across the 2-4-7. Steve Kelly's a rather difficult shot to convert. See also the same lecture about the accordion shots. But Steve Kelly will only take the 8 and leave everything else. Leonardi for the spare bid, and he'll get it. He'll take the 2-4-7-10, play the wood, get the sidewall action, and it all goes. That's like Anthony Leonardi's 3rd really pretty spare today. Really pretty shots. So Anthony Leonardi with that spare is at 110 after 9 and a bonus. Steve Kelly with that 8 box is at 100 after 9. One more box to go before these bowlers sit. and complete the fourth game, of course. Steve Kelly on a spare on lane 9. No, sorry, Anthony Leonardi on a spare on lane 19, excuse me. Got all of the people and then all the numbers wrong there. Steve Kelly drops 9. The 2 pin is left on the deck on lane 20. Anthony Leonardi is off to the right of the head pin, and oof, it's going to be a 4 fill. 114 after 9 for Anthony Leonardi. Leaves the 1, 2, 4, 7, 5, 8, and 10, I believe. It's a 4 fill regardless. Steve Kelly will take a spare, though, on the single for 110 in 10 plus a ball. Anthony Leonardi leaves the 9, no spare for the 10th frame. The 9 pin is all that's left on the deck. 123 is confirmed now with that 9 box for Anthony Leonardi for a 4-game total of 459. Steve Kelly currently at 527 plus a bonus pending this next ball. 110 and a ball for Steve Kelly in the 4th. Anthony Leonardi, 4-game total of 459. All of our bowlers today really bowling impressively, though. Really good scoring games, regardless of what class conference you're in. This has been quality bowling here, folks, for all 4 of our bowlers today at Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama. Steve Kelly, final ball. It's way off to the right, but it's a generous mix of 5, so 115 will be his 4th game for a 4-game total of 532 for Steve Kelly. So that will be the 5th game. Excuse me, the 4th game for Steve Kelly and Anthony Leonardi, as Tom Grasso and Steve Poulin will shortly be returning to the decks, and will close out the 4th game here on the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. I hope this broadcast finds you well. Everyone involved here, from the bowlers to the staff you cannot see in frame, all appreciate your viewership and interest in the world of Candlepin bowling. If you live in the area or are willing to make the pilgrimage, the Candlepin bowling community would absolutely appreciate your interest and visitation. Check out candlepin.org and click Go Bowling to find your nearest center if you would like to give this unique regional sport a try. As a 7 drop for Steve Poulin, and a bit of a misfire for Tom Grasso. It appears to be a 4 drop. Steve Poulin on the 2-4-7, and the 7 doesn't go. He plays the 2-4, gets some bouncy sidewall action, and things just don't work out. And Tom Grasso, second ball, doesn't connect with anything. Steve Poulin will start off the second half of the 4th game with a 9 box for 59 after 6, and Tom Grasso will, my goodness, take only 1 more pin for a 5 box in the 6th for 63 after 6 for Tom Grasso, 59 after 6 for Steve Poulin. Steve Kelly gets that 67 after 6 versus Steve Poulin's 59, and Anthony Leonardi is at 83 after 6 versus Tom Grasso's 63. Score update, the equivalent points of the match. And do forgive the visual scores kind of blinking in and out, and with some of the wrong numbers, they do get corrected eventually. It's just things had to just get settled there. I think they are correct now. 115 for Steve Kelly, 123 for Anthony Leonardi. And that's a spare for Steve Poulin in the 7th, 69 and a bonus. Tom Grasso just trying to make something happen on lane 19, but no spare for him. He's shooting for a 10 box. He'll take 2 out. He'll take 3 out. He'll leave the head pin for a 9 box on lane 19 for 72 after 7 for Tom Grasso. So Steve Poulin at this point is at 69 and a fill after 7, and really needs to make something happen here at the 7th to catch up to Steve Kelly's 115. And speaking of action, though, the 7 and 10 all of a sudden just get the string pulled on them. That's a strike by Steve Poulin, a strike on spare. That's 89, and a bonus fill in the 8th. Tom Grasso's off to the left of the head pin, and he drops 4, leaves 6. The 4 is on the right side, and the 7 and the 8 are on the deck. No wood. Tom Grasso attempts a left curve, but only takes the 3 and the 6, leaves the 1, the 7, the 8, and the 10 on lane 19. And Grasso, 3rd ball for the 10 box, and it just misses. He'll take a 6. That will put him at 78 after 8 for Tom Grasso. Compare that to 100 after 8 for Anthony Leonardi. Steve Poulin currently at 89 and a bonus in 8. Compare that to 92 after 8 for Steve Kelly. With that strike on spare, Steve Poulin is now in good positioning. Steve Poulin fires, and he's on the head pin, the 1-2 pocket. Pins are still mixing, still falling. 7, 9, 10. 7 fill so far for Steve Poulin. Tom Grasso is not on the head pin, but drops 6. 1, 2, 8, and 9 are on the deck. Steve Poulin is a lumber yard in front of the 7, 9, and 10. Slightly right of center. And he plays the wood, though, and will take a spare. Steve Poulin is now at 109. 109 plus a bonus in the 9th. Tom Grasso, though, will take a spare of his own for 88 and a bonus in 9. Anthony Leonardi is at 114 after 9 with his spare and 4 fill. Steve Kelly is at 109. Steve Poulin looks like he potentially is pulling ahead 5 fill. That puts Steve Poulin at 114 in 9. And Tom Grasso drops 6, puts 6 on his fill for 94 and 9. Down by 20 at this point to Anthony Leonardi. Steve Poulin doesn't get a spare there, leaves the 3, 6, 10. Tom Grasso plays the object pin, but leaves the 7, 6, and 10 on the deck. No mark for either bowler. Steve Poulin on the 3, 6, 10. He'll take a 10 box for 124 and a 4-game total of 491 for Steve Poulin. He takes the 4th game and has suddenly taken the total back. And Tom Grasso with that 7 box, he's at 101. And that's a 4-game total of 429 for Tom Grasso. Just down by 30 to Anthony Leonardi's 4-game total of 459. Anthony Leonardi takes the 4th game, 123 to Tom Grasso's 101. So this is a super competitive match, all bowlers averaging over 100. So we're going to be moving on to the 5th game now. So currently Steve Kelly has 6 points, Steve Poulin has 2 points, not counting the grand total pinfall. Anthony Leonardi has 6 points, Tom Grasso has 2 points. That's where we stand as we go to the 5th and final game. Steve Kelly is up in the total by 41, 532 to Steve Poulin's 491. And, excuse me, my comment earlier about Steve Poulin taking back the total was inaccurate. I'm not sure which number I read backwards, but hey, you know. And Leonardi is up by 30 over Tom Grasso, 459 to 429. That's your score update. Haphazard score update, but here it is. Anthony Leonardi is shooting for a spare, and he leaves the 4 on the deck. Steve Kelly with a left side half Worcester. Second ball sails through the same void. The void staring back at him. And Anthony Leonardi can't seem to take the 4 out. He'll take a 9 box to start the 5th game out, 9 after 1. Steve Kelly will clean up the best he can. And it looks to be an 8 box for Steve Kelly. Although it looked like there was a sleeper pin, which is interesting, but officially it ended up being scored as an 8, so going to just go with what was on the official score sheet. As I say, I'm recording this in post-production, so, and the scores have been submitted since, so just going to go with what we've got. Every once in a while we do occasionally have some mistakes made in the scoring here and there, and while we do our best to do as much validation as we possibly can, every once in a while things do fall through the cracks now and again. Steve Kelly with a spare and Anthony Leonardi with a spare. 18 and a bonus after 2 for Steve Kelly, and 19 and a bonus after 2 for Anthony Leonardi. Both bowlers with stereo spares. Anthony Leonardi on lane 20. He fires. He's just off to the right of the head pin. He's picking up the pace a little bit. He drops 8, 27 after 2. Steve Kelly also to the right of the head pin, and it looks like he's also going to get an 8 fill for 26 after 2. It's making my job easy. It's nearly the same numbers. Just Anthony Leonardi is just +1. Leonardi on the 1-2 for a spare shot, and he will get it. That's 37 and a bonus after 3. And Steve Kelly for his bonus, or his spare shot, he punches the head pin a little bit too hard and leaves the 2, unfortunately. Now shooting for the 10 box just to clean up, and he'll get the 10 for 36 after 3. 2 boxes to go before these bowlers complete their final first half of the day. Anthony Leonardi on lane 20 will lead off first. as our bowlers are just discussing a quick score correction. And I remember what happened there. I just clicked the wrong thing, completely missed it, but luckily Steve Poulin was right there just to help me out. That's a 7 drop for Anthony Leonardi. He's left with the 1, the 2, and the 4. Steve Kelly drops 8. The 6 and the 7 are on the deck. And Anthony Leonardi looking to clean up. 3 pins on the deck. He misfires. He only takes the 4, leaves the 1 and the 2. Steve Kelly on the 6 and the 7, and for the spare bid, and it goes. The ball comes around to take the 7 in a big thank you moment. Steve Kelly's at 46 and a ball after 4. Anthony Leonardi shooting for a 10 box. He's got the 1 and the 2 on the deck to shoot at. Leonardi fires, and he's got the 10 box for 54 after 4. Steve Kelly's at 46 after 4, plus a ball. Leonardi fires to the left of the head pin. 1, 5, 6, 9, 10 on lane 20. Steve Kelly is to the left of the head pin. Takes out just a few pins on the left side. A 4 drop. 1, 5, 3, 9, 6, 10 are left on the deck with no wood. Leonardi on the 1, 5, 6, 9, 10. He's off to the right. Plays the wood on the 6, 9, 10. Leaves the 1 on the 5. Steve Kelly leaves the head pin on the deck. Misfire. Both bowlers misfiring on their spare bids. No spares for either bowler. Anthony Leonardi takes an 8, and you saw that wincing face. And Steve Kelly will take a 10. Steve Kelly is at, with a 4 fill, 50 after 4 and 60 after 5. Anthony Leonardi with that 8 fill is at 62 after 5. And the scores will just be going in just a moment, just to get those in. So they'll be showing up on your screen in just a moment. But we're going to be moving on to Steve Poulin and Tom Grasso for them to finish their final first half of the day. And you may see that Steve Kelly currently has a 58 half, but he just keyed something in wrong. That will get fixed in time. I do remember doing that, and I just had a brain fart moment. You know, everyone has those. Tom Grasso is off to the right of the head pin and drops a few. Drops 3. And Steve Poulin punches only the 3. That is what is known as a quarter Worcester. It's not even a half Worcester because the 9 pin is standing. Tom Grasso takes a few more pins out. That's a 1, 2, 4, 5 left on the deck. Steve Poulin for the spare bit on the quarter Worcester, and he leaves the 7, 10, 5, 6. Grasso for the 10 box. He'll take a 7, I believe. An 8 box, excuse me. There was no sleeper pin that time. And Steve Poulin will take a 6. 8 after 1 for Grasso. 6 after 1 for Poulin. All 4 bowlers with relatively oddly low-scoring first frames in this 5th game. We'll see if things pick up here in just a moment. Grasso a little bit too full on the head pin. That's a spread eagle with 1 talon on the right. It's a 3-pin spread eagle. Steve Poulin is to the left of the head pin, and he drops 5. I believe it's 5. I'm going to gingerly say it's 5 because I'm not sure if there was a sleeper there or not. Tom Grasso looking to convert the eagle. He leaves the 3, 6, 10, no mark. And Steve Poulin will take everything out for 16 after 2 plus a bonus. That's a spare. He's on the board. Grasso 7, 8, 9, or 10, and he'll take a 9 box, leaving the 3 on the deck for 17 after 2. Compare that to Anthony Leonardi's 27 after 2. Steve Kelly has 26 after 2 with his spare 8. Steve Poulin is filling a spare on lane 19. But Tom Grasso will fire first because he's on the right on lane 20 in the gray shirt. Steve Poulin is in the blue shirt. And Tom Grasso fires. He's to the right of the head pin and drops 7. The 1, 2, 9 are on the deck. Poulin on a spare, working on a spare, and it's a strike on spare for Steve Poulin. 36 and a bonus after 3 with that strike on spare. Tom Grasso trying to get a spare of his own, but he can't quite take the 1 and the 2 out. Grasso will take 1 more out for a 9 box for 26 after 3. So Steve Poulin getting the marks where it counts. He's currently at 36 and a bonus after 3. Tom Grasso at 26 after 3. Grasso will lead off first. He fires shotgun snap down the lane. Play action. Football terms in bowling. He drops 8, 1-2 on the deck. Poulin is off to the right, and that's, well, an interesting amount of pins fallen, but he gets one more. At least with a strike, you get 2 balls for the fill. Tom Grasso is trying to shoot the 1 and 2, and he's just having trouble finding that pocket. No spare for Grasso. Steve Poulin for the spare on strike on spare, and he'll get 80% of the way, an 8 fill. That puts Steve Poulin at 44 after 3 with the fill completed. And the wood deflects the ball for an 8 box for 52 after 4 for Poulin, and 35 after 4 for Tom Grasso with that 9 box. 1 box to go before our bowlers sit, and we say hello to the away bowlers one last time. Tom Grasso will lead off. He's just in the hunt for a mark. And he's off to the right of the headpin again. Seems to be a bit of a common theme. He's left with the 1-2-4. Steve Poulin right on the headpin. Almost a little too much. He's left with the 4-6-3 on the deck. And Tom Grasso, 1-2-4. And he fires. And the ball just tails to the left just at the last second. And it doesn't take the headpin, so there's no mark. Steve Poulin sails right through the center. Takes nothing. No mark for either bowler. Tom Grasso, 9 box or a 10 box, and he fires on lane 20. He'll take a 10 box for 45 after 5. Steve Poulin with that 7 box. He'll finish with 59 after 5. Just doing a quick smash cut here, just because there was a brief awkward delay while the scores were just being corrected. So Steve Kelly's up in the total by 42 and up in the game by 1 at this point. Anthony Leonardi is up in the total by 47 and up in the game by 17. By the end of the first half of the 5th game. But now that everything's been corrected, Steve Kelly is now just going down to the return to the approaches. Apologies for the visual score inaccuracies prior to that first half. I was explaining to Steve Poulin, just my brain broke for a minute, just trying to do mental math and just validate everything. Happens after a while, after bowling 5 games and running the scoreboard, both in paper copy form and digital copy form, so I always appreciate your patience on that. Takes quite a bit to put on a production like this sometimes. Steve Kelly starts out on lane 20. First ball, and is nearly a strike. It looked like a strike if you back up a couple of frames, but he leaves the 10 on the deck. And Anthony Leonardi is on the headpin, and he drops 8. That's the 5 and the 2 on the deck. Steve Kelly in a single pin spare opportunity on the 10 pin, and he'll take it. That's a 70 and a ball after 6 for Steve Kelly. And Anthony Leonardi all the while. He takes 2 more out of his own. So in the 6th, both bowlers have spares. That's 72 and a bonus in the 6th for Anthony Leonardi, and 70 and a bonus for Steve Kelly. Steve Kelly and Anthony Leonardi seem to be matching each other in terms of the marks and overall box for box action, this game in particular. It's like mirror images almost. And Steve Kelly drops 6 on the spare. 76 after 6 to finish the 6th frame, and Anthony Leonardi, he'll drop 3, unfortunately. That's 75 after 6 for Anthony Leonardi. Both bowlers within 1 point of each other. Again, they're not bowling each other, but it's almost as if they were. So it's that competitive spirit. Steve Kelly fires for the spare bit and hits a little bit full, unfortunately leaves the 3 and the 6 on the deck. And Anthony Leonardi is on the pocket, but leaves the 5, just gets a little bit of a raw deal there. Steve Kelly in the 3-6, and he'll just miss a little bit for an 8 box. That puts Steve Kelly at 84 after 7. Anthony Leonardi for the 9 box. Now he's at 84 after 7. Both bowlers with almost identical scores at this point. Well, exactly identical scores for that matter. In terms of the game total, not necessarily in terms of the box quantities. So Kelly will start out on lane 20, opening ball. And he is on, no, not on the head pin. Drops 7, 1-3, 10. Anthony Leonardi, wild pitch to left. That's just the 7 pin, 1 drop. And Kelly looking to complete the spare bid, and unfortunately, just the wood gets deflected. And he doesn't take the 10, so there's no 10 box for no spare for Steve Kelly, and no spare for Anthony Leonardi. Anthony Leonardi is looking at a pile of pins still. Steve Kelly will foul it off for a 9 box. That's 93 and 8. Anthony Leonardi will take an ugly 7 box for 91 and 8. Both bowlers getting interesting pin action, or lack thereof, here towards the end of the 5th game. A couple of shots that just should have gone, but sometimes that's Candlepin bowling for you. Kelly fires first on lane 20. The opening pitch on the 1-2 pocket. Pins are still mixing, and it's an 8 drop, the 9 and the 10 with wood all around it. There's a piece of wood diagonal to the 9 and the 10 to kind of make like a little percent sign if you somehow looked at the pins from top down. Anthony Leonardi is off to the left, drops 4. Steve Kelly, and the wood deflects the ball, and cannot believe what he's seeing, but piece of wayward wood that wasn't the object. Wood deflects the ball away. Anthony Leonardi, also no such luck, leaves the 8, the 10, and the 6. Steve Kelly plays the other wood and caps it, and it deflects everything away. That's a heartbreaking 8 box for Steve Kelly in the 9th for 101 and 9. Anthony Leonardi will take an 8 of his own for 99 in 9. With 1 box to go before these 2 bowlers sit. Steve Kelly currently at 101. Anthony Leonardi at 99 at the end of the 9th frame. And Kelly will fire first. Final first ball of this match. He's on the 1-2 pocket, and it's a 7 drop. 3, 6, 10. No wood. Anthony Leonardi is also on the head pin. Nearly a strike. Drops everything but the 6. 9 pins down, 1 pin up. On lane 19. Meanwhile, on lane 20, it's the 3, 6, 10. Steve Kelly for the spare bid. Fires, and it's just off to a little bit to the left of the 3 pin. Unfortunately, it just doesn't take anything. A couple of missed marker opportunities there left on the table. Leonardi on the single pin spare shot. And he plays the wood and unfortunately misses the pin entirely. No mark for either bowler. Steve Kelly will finish with a 9 box with a 110 for a 5-game total of 642 for Steve Kelly. And Anthony Leonardi will finish with a 108 with that 9 box for a 5-game total of 567. For the day, Steve Kelly went 31 for 50 on the head pin with 8 splits. Anthony Leonardi went 17 for 50 with 7 splits. It's always nice to see that split count in particular be fairly low. So, anyways, we're going to say hello one last time to our home bowlers. Tom Grasso in the gray on the left on lane 19 and Steve Poulin in the blue on lane 20. And just before we go, I'd just like to say a couple special thanks, including our ACST committee members, including our league commissioner Danny Finn, ACST treasurer Rich Lamone for Class A, ACST stats and numbers, spreadsheets, graphs, you name it. The website for all the stats, crunched by Micah Imperato. Brian Hebert for advice and direction. The staff, the generous staff at Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama, who are running a very busy house on this particular day, as you could see all throughout the match. And always viewers like you for watching. Always appreciate you watching whenever, however you are watching this match. Wouldn't be doing this without you. Anyways, for Steve Poulin, that's a spare in the 6th. That's 69 and a ball in the 6th. Anthony Leonardi looking to clean up, but he'll take a 9 box in the 6th for 54 to conclude the 6th frame for Tom Grasso. Excuse me, not Anthony Leonardi, Tom Grasso, excuse me. So Steve Poulin, the benchmark is 642, which is, when you bowl over 600, generally that's quite an impressive 5-game total. 642 is not an unimpressive number to chase, especially for Steve Poulin. But Steve Poulin will certainly attempt. He'll start with a 9 drop. That puts him at 78 after 6. Tom Grasso is not on the head pin. He drops 5, 1, 2, 6, 8, and 10 on the deck. Steve Poulin plays the wood, misses the pin, but plays the wood for his 2nd spare. 88 and a ball after 7 for Poulin. Grasso, no mark. He's looking just to clean things up and pin things out for a 7 box or higher. 2 down, 1 up. That's going to be a 9 box for Tom Grasso. 54 after 6 with that 9 box. Steve Poulin is looking to fill his 2nd spare in a row in the 7th. He's at 88 and a ball after 7. fires now, and he's off to the right of the headpin, but he's going to get a decent mix. It's going to be a fill of 6, 94 and 7 for Steve Poulin. Tom Grasso's on the headpin. He's got the left side accordion with no wood. Oh no. 7, 8, 4, 5. Poulin. And he's going lights out. That's another spare 104 and a ball for Steve Poulin in the 8th now. My goodness, he's definitely making a run for that total. And he's definitely well on his way to take the 5th game as well. And Grasso, no mark, but he'll take an 8 box for 71 and 8 for Tom Grasso. Steve Poulin, he's got 5 marks this game, and he's on 3 marks in a row right now. 104 and a ball as he stretches his legs a bit. So, folks, if you enjoyed what you saw and want to see more, I have a couple of socials for you to follow, and I'll list them off in a little bit. That's a 9 drop for Steve Poulin, though, on the spare. 113 after 8. And Tom Grasso gets a left side Candlepin corner, unfortunately. Bit of a misfire once again. And Poulin, that's his 4th mark in a row, 4th spare in a row. That's 123, plus a ball in the 9th. 6 marks this game for Steve Poulin. Tom Grasso just fishing for pins at this point. Takes 3 leaves 2 for an 8 box. 79 after 9 for Tom Grasso. So we have plenty of socials to follow. There's such as the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour page on Facebook, the Candlepin Chat group on Facebook, Candlepin Bowling Network on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, Candlepin Corner on YouTube, at Candlepin Bowling on TikTok, Outrun the Bear on Facebook and Instagram, Alley Chat on YouTube, Wolfman12395 on YouTube, the Candlepin Bowling channel on YouTube, the Ripping the Rack podcast on YouTube, the Approach podcast, Tony Levesque on YouTube, Charlie Collins on TikTok, and 3 Ball Spare on YouTube. That's a 7 drop for Steve Poulin. It's 130 and 9, and he unfortunately breaks the mark streak. Tom Grasso has a left side half Worcester. Second ball is a great remedial second ball, but leaves a few pins on the deck. Steve Poulin will finish his 5th game with a 10 for 140 in the 5th game for a 5-game total of 631 for Steve Poulin. Tom Grasso will finish with a 9 box, and he'll finish with 88 for a 5-game total of 517 for Tom Grasso. You may notice that I forgot to key in the 10th frame visually, but I'm just going to give you that information auditorially. But anyways, as Steve Poulin comments, Steve Kelly's an animal, apparently. His words, not mine. So anyways, with the conclusion of this game, Steve Kelly takes 10 points to Steve Poulin's 4, 642 to 631. That's a monster of a match for both bowlers, well over 600, which is quite impressive. And then Anthony Leonardi will take 12 points over Tom Grasso, 567 to 517 respectively. In terms of the marks, Steve Kelly had 1 strike and 24 spares. Steve Poulin had 4 strikes and 18 spares. Steve Kelly went 62% on the headpin, 31 for 50. Steve Poulin went 58% on the headpin, 29 for 50. Leonardi had 18 for 50 on the headpin. Grasso had 20 for 50 on the headpin. 7 splits for Leonardi, 10 splits for Grasso, and 8 splits for Kelly, and 10 splits for Poulin. And anyway, so that will just about do it for us at Portsmouth Bowl-O-Rama. I've been Steve Kelly, and for Anthony Leonardi, Tom Grasso, Steve Poulin, and Steve Kelly, we'll see you at the next Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour match. Have a great one, everybody.